You know that I run it. Everything you wanna do, I already done it. And I got your little boo telling me she love me. I got this one, that one. Damn, it's gonna be a long night.
Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of The View from Mars. You're here with Fedel. Hello. You're here with Sam.
Hi guys.
And Steve.
Hey, how are you doing?
The same people. Okay, good stuff. Hey, listen, what we're talking about in this episode is mental health, specifically mental health in men, given the fact that all three of us are, in fact, men, and we've all got our own little journeys and little stories with regards to that. The other thing is, there's sort of the purpose. I think it's a good opportunity for all three of us to sort of open that lid, that can of worms, in terms of some of the unknowns in mental health. And a lot of people will see us as individuals and see that we're happy-go-lucky, or the type of personality that we are. But in fact, under the surface, each of us have our own struggles and our own journeys with that. And I think it's important to share. You guys got anything to add before we sort of crack on?
No, ready to just dive in, yeah.
Yeah, cool. Jock, you got anything?
Man, I think you've started off well. Let's give it a go and see how we go with it.
Let's crack on. All right. Well, on that then, let's start with you, Jock, because I like you to break the ice. And let's give you the floor and let you have a chat about some of your experience with your personal experience with mental health.
Yeah, man. But I think it's a tricky topic to talk about, because it's that whole notion with how I've grown up with, toughen up, boys don't cry, you don't cry, nothing happens to you. If something bad happens to you, don't say anything. You just take the bruises with life. And you learn to, I guess for me, I've learned over the years to deal with the scars privately, silently, behind closed doors. But I think where I started to feel...
Do you have like an example, particularly that you like?
Yeah. Coming right to it. I think where I started to feel like the real pressures of life was the breakdown of my business. Like, I've never really told anyone this before. Like, coming to the end of 2014, 2015, at the time, the business was going really well, but we started to hit struggles in the business. And
for people who don't know, what was the business?
Yeah. So the business was, I ran a gym, very successful gym, but there was a time in the gym where things changed. So I ran a 24-hour gym, and we were doing very well, but competition caught up, and people started to take on the idea of people were investing, instead of real estate, they would invest in gyms, because the return on investment was they would get their return on investment a lot quicker than they would get on a real estate. So you have these people because of memberships, and you could get 1,000 members in a very small space very quickly. So you would have people who had no idea about a gym or how to run a gym, take the money and say, well, we'll just put somebody in the gym, open a gym, and we'll get 1,000 members, and our return on investment will be a lot quicker than to say put $500,000 into a house and wait 30 years to get the return on investment. But what happened is it saturated the market. So you had this thing where a lot of big gyms, like the big Fitness First, Good Lives, who caught on and said, right, we have to stay current with the market and turn 24 hours. So for me as a young 24, 25-year-old, we started to see the change in the market. I started to see the change in the market, and our business started to take a real knock in sales. People started to leave. People wanted ridiculous cheaper prices on their membership. I didn't know how to innovate the business.
So yeah, so all of those things though, that how did
Yeah.
that then manifest
Yeah.
into it?
So that
issues?
manifested into the failings of the business,
Mhm.
and manifested into the closing down of the business. So for me, that took a real knock on my, it took a knock on my pride,
Mhm.
and I fell deep into depression, because I didn't know how to deal with it, and the loss of the judgment of others around me because I was out of a job. I didn't know how to manage the business because as anyone would say, if a gym closes down or a business closes down, your class is a failure, and that really hurt, and I took that hard. And then also I'm having to sell my house and then having to move back in with my parents,
Mm.
losing my relationship at that time as well.
Yeah.
It took a knock in me, and I did not know how to deal with it, and I didn't have anyone to talk to. So I felt really bad into depression. And no matter how much anybody would kind of tell me, we're here for you, and you're able to talk, I did not know how to articulate that. How do you, a 24-year-old who's in highs of life within 1 year, lose everything? How do you articulate that to your friends who are now just moving into their careers? I did not know how to articulate that. So I turned to substance abuse. So I turned to prescription drugs, and I fell deep into addiction. And it took me 3 to 4 years to actually get off substance abuse. Which was really hard.
When you say substance abuse, is that in terms of like over self-medicating in terms to dull sort of the hurt?
Yeah, so I would over medicate to dull the pain, which would make me really high. So for example, I would take OxyContin, which is a pain medication, relief of pain medication, but I would over medicate for the high that would give you. But it would give you a nice release. You would go numb inside. You wouldn't feel anything, and it would feel like you're almost asleep. So I pretty much, in the mornings when I wake up, over medicate.
Sort of relying on that medication to block what's actually going underneath, to provide that false image of things are good.
Steve, things are good.
Steve, you were around that. Like, I was away a lot of, when as the gym was closing and you were getting rid of the house. Steve, did you see any sort of any changes in Sam's behavior? Like, I remember calling Sam, and I think, Sam, we had discussions where I think for a long time we're like, man, there's something not right. You're not right in the headspace. But the substance abuse was sort of not known for a long time.
Well, you remember the bag?
Yeah. You'd always walk around with your little medicine bag, everywhere. Yeah,
the medicine bag. Yeah.
I didn't necessarily see anything from that. I knew he was struggling, but he just closed himself off a bit. So I knew the pressures that were there, being in business myself. But it's one of the things that you do, I guess, is you just don't talk about it. You know what I mean? Like, as you mentioned before, as Sam mentioned before, that you just kind of wear it for yourself, and you kind of go, well, this is my problem to solve. Men solve problems. Even though you're not necessarily trained that way, do you know what I mean? Like, you're not taught, men solve problems. It's just a societal norm that gets passed down, not necessarily from generation to generation, but just culturally. Right. So I guess you just took that on. Like, I never sat in school and they were like, men don't cry. They never said that.
Well, I'd
wasn't a
actually
direct
say,
teaching.
I'd actually say that you almost have, not directly in terms of like a teacher saying men don't cry, but in
correct.
terms
Yeah,
of
yeah. So
you're
you do
taught,
pick it up, correct?
You're taught through the development of masculinity that
Through osmosis.
that this is a thing, and whether that's you on the rugby field or in your case the soccer field, and you take a hit and it's like harden up, and then that same rationale then compounds in terms of the mental, because that's a really it's a really sort of vulnerable aspect to be like, there's something not quite right going on in my head at the moment. And that's
correct.
And you got to also understand this sort of we're used to, our dad. Me and Stephen, dad, our fathers never failed us.
Yeah.
Once in our lifetime, never. So we're so used to seeing our idol, our mentor, because he's our mentor. My dad is my mentor, no one else. We're used to him coming through.
Yeah.
We're used to him finding a way through absolute horror, and he, for some reason, finds a way to succeed. So we've always been like, we can find a way, we can find a way, we can find a way. When I couldn't find a way, I felt so less of myself, and I felt like I'm not the son that I thought I was.
Because you're not meeting the expectations of that
I'm
mirror that you're looking at.
Yeah, and don't care how my father would say to me, son, this is just life. You don't need to meet. I'm proud of you no matter what. He'd say that to me every day. I'm proud of you no matter what. I'd want to meet that expectation, and I could not do it. And that's what also broke me inside, because I'm like, me and Stephen are supposed to be the sons who are now moving into that role of taking the leadership and carrying the name forward. And we still can't do it. And it just, that really hurt. And, I just found that to this day, that's still.
So,
to this day,
I'll bring something in there. Sorry, what did you say? You're still what? Sorry, I'll cut you off there.
To this day, that's still. I still suffer with that to this day.
So, what I'm hearing you talk about is a expectation, right? That you feel as though you have to achieve something, right, for whatever reason. Where do you think that expectation came from? The reason I ask is because, like, we're technically brought up in the same household, and my expectation is different to yours.
I don't know. I think I'm just. I don't know.
It might be the fact. I think it might be the weight that maybe Sam places in terms of his relationship with Dad, as opposed to you. For instance, obviously you're both close with the family, but in terms of Sam might look at Dad as a pinnacle, whereas you might look at Dad as a guide, and to allow you to go in a different direction. Whereas for Sam, maybe it's important that he wants to replicate the behaviors that he sees in his father. So.
Yeah. So I don't know. The reason I ask is I commonly, and as a dad now, right, I'm trying to instill the right confidence, the right self-esteem, the right expectations in my son and daughter, and I'm just trying to work out, was it some, because it has to be compounding, right? This is if I look at my experience, like my mental health necessarily manifested in anxiety, but not from a performance point of not from a performance point of view. So the reason I want to is, if the expectation, it can't just come from one source. So I'll explain what I mean. For example, my mental health came from working with my business partner at work, right? So, but we did high level work, and we were working with the largest retailers in the world, in America and China, here in Australia. So the pressures from a business point of view were very, very high. Multiple 9-figure business, multiple 7- and 8-figure contracts. But the way that I was treated was what created my anxiety. because he would berate me for anything. I would do the things right. I get berated. I do things wrong. I get berated. But because I was stuck in the business, I stayed in the business. And I went into that with an expectation, but with my boundaries in the wrong place. But it wasn't just once or twice. It was like after 5 years or 3 years, it would have been 3.5 years of consistent compounding.
Yep.
That eventually led to the anxiety and having to be prescribed, Valium, got a prescription of Valium. That wasn't strong enough. It wasn't doing anything. So I had to go back and get a double dosage, and that barely took the edge off. So my anxiety and mental health came from compounding of experience of being told you shit, being told that you're not doing anything right, and things like that. So so that's why I ask it. Was it a compounding thing that you think that this expectations come from? Maybe, from a football coach, because obviously you're a high level sports player. Was it stuff like, was your football coach the same? Was your swimming coach the same? Did you have those expectations from other things as well? Or
I don't know. It's a deeper question. So. But anyway, look. Yeah. It's a further discussion. So, but
So Steve, on that, you started to touch on some of your things that you've battled. So specifically, is it just the compound anxiety based from the pressures of a superior in this case?
Correct. Yeah, and I guess there was an element of always trying to keep everybody happy, because that's what I had to start managing. Because I was like, "Fuck, how do I keep them happy?" Do you know what I mean? I could sign a 9-figure contract, an 8-figure contract, and I'd still do something wrong. But I didn't. I would take all that on me, not realizing that the problem was really him. But then how that anxiety manifested, it manifested in other areas of my life. So then, I was anxious to go home, or I was anxious to answer the phone. Like I had about a year and a half where I couldn't answer the phone because from PTSD.
Just because you're worried about what's on the other line.
Just because I was worried about what's on the other end, so I couldn't answer my phone. So that's kind of what it got to over time. So that was that, and I just didn't know whether I was going to get a good person, a bad person, get berated, whatever it may be. And I just couldn't take the strain because it was really starting to dig deeper into my identity, I guess you could say, as who I was as a person and what my value was. Because even though I was pretty strong, if you slowly chip away at something, it quickly starts to affect you. So, and similar to Sam, and again, I'm sure a lot of men do it. Is one, there's no open forums of trust where you can have a conversation. I have a good relationship with my dad, so my dad knew. But outside of that, everyone's asking how you doing, doing well, flowing, buying new cars. So on the outside, things look great. But if you don't have enough time, like for me, in those 3.5 years, I didn't have time to build a relationship with anybody, not even including my wife. Right? Yeah. Really, because I just got married before I got bought out, and to move into this new business. So what relationship do you have? It was me, myself, and I. So you just internally start to wear that out. You can't have a conversation with anybody because you're not sure if you can trust anybody because of your experiences that you're having. And again, if there's nobody to relate necessarily, you kind of feel alone in it all, right? So because men genuinely don't have the conversation about mental health or talk about mental health, or these were the issues that I have, like normally, because what we do is we attach what we do to what our identity is. Everything is normally, we're pretty good, we're nailing this. So no one ever says, it's shit, or it's crap, it's not doing well. So who do you relate to when things are going wrong? Who can you have a conversation with when things are going on? And I guess that speaks into the importance of having relationships in the right areas for people who are in places where you want to go or places where you want to be, so you can have a conversation with them in a safe space with them. So I couldn't talk to anybody. It was me and dad. That was it.
And then
And,
the case of multiple instances that are causing anxiety because
correct.
because of an individual failure in terms of tackling them early, they build up that snowball
Correct.
effect.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I didn't set the right boundaries early to say, hey, this is where my stance is. I know who I am. You do that, I walk away, which is what I should have done. But I was so far deep into it because I had all my money tied up into it and things like that. That you start to compromise your values. And and again, one of the big things of anxiety, of depression. This is my thoughts, and there is some evidence to back it up. Is that if you're not doing things that you value, you're not keeping promises to yourself, and that creates that anxiety. And in some cases depression, because you're not living up to what your character that is your character. So that was where my flaw was. I compromised my values in being disrespected, and that eventually over time meant that I couldn't answer a phone. Didn't matter who was on it. I just lived on airplane mode.
Yeah.
Lived on airplane mode. You leave a text message.
Yeah. What about you? Yeah. Okay. What about you, Fidel? What about your I guess
My encounters with
I guess your encounter mental
stuff, personal. So there's two particular instances. 2015, completing my third year in Townsville, and what I noticed is I fell into a depression kind of state. Massive amount of work, a lot of work stresses, eventually also relationship breakdown, a lot of loneliness, and I became rather isolated in Townsville, and to the point that I actually broke down. And I remember there was this one instant where I was sitting in my apartment in the dark, eating pizza, watching a video on how to speak Russian. No idea. But it was bizarre.
Yeah.
I'm just there eating pizza in pitch black, just being like, "По-русски." I'm like, anyway. And I was like, man, I need to change. And so that's when I sort of looked at opportunities to force myself to be social in order to get out of that funk. The second sort of encounter that I've had personally is actually this year with multiple, not only being in Melbourne with that sort of stress, but currently undergoing some major issues with the property that I've bought, which is a lot of that compound stress. And my brain is, I'm quite a resilient individual. And so what I actually found is that my body displayed the symptoms of a friend of mine, she's a doctor, and sort of said, well, I think you've got adjustment disorder in terms of compounding anxiety and sleep deprivation combined into one nasty little box, where I was actually having tremors in my sleep, which, so I would lay down and I would feel my body moving and having tremors. And so that was, for me, it was like, on the inside, my brain power is strong enough to be able to deal with everything. But obviously my body is showing the symptoms that maybe things aren't as good mentally as I am actually dealing with it, because it's finding the weakest point, which is through my body.
So it's like finding different ways to
show
release it. To release it.
Wow. Yeah. And it
do
was.
Do you want to? Sorry to cut you. Do you want to give us an example? Talk to us a little bit about the pressures you've had with the house, for example.
So
not in too much depth, obviously. But how much you feel,
so dodgy builder creating building defects, which later you find out the joys of post-purchase investigation, which causes significant noise, and like I said, like I've said to you, Sam, it's going through the process of being fixed, but still causing massive stress because it's a massive blow on the excitement of buying a property. Another thing to have to deal with, relationship breakdown on the side, being locked in my home since March in Melbourne.
Right.
The issues with my work, there was, what I'm doing this year has been a goal of mine for 5 years, and to have 2020 interrupt that goal in a way that it removed some of the really unique parts that I'd spent 5 years working towards. So all of that manifested, and again, I'm able to deal with it, but my body showed that maybe there's some things that I need to change, because I'm actually not dealing well as I thought I was.
It paints a picture like with the issues of work and in life. Like one thing that you said in 2015, how you said the pressures of work. And I mean, you'd be able to comment on this one, Stephen. It was like, and I think everyone would be able to relate to this. Are we getting pushed now to the limit with work life that it's now starting to affect our sight and how we, interact on a daily basis outside of work, where it's now causing issues with our body, with how we operate, with how we interact with people, to the point where we're now starting to become lonely, depressed, having anxiety issues. Do we feel that there are situations, or are companies looking at the fact that we should start looking at how do we have men talk about these things, in terms of are we going to develop new ideas around how we can make workplace situations a lot better, so you can handle life in a better way? So nobody got that. Okay, cool. All right, guys. All right, guys. That's very much.
I was watching.
Wait, wait, guys. No, it's okay. We're good.
So, okay. No, I'll comment.
Speak into that.
I'll comment real quickly on that. So one, in the workplace, in a lot of workplaces, there are a lot of different programs and stuff like that actually do deal with providing men and women the ability to talk, to deal with things. In terms of, do you think that work contributes to that? Yeah, it's expectation management. It's the old case of you have 8 hours to do a task and you do it in 6, and then that becomes the new norm. And we constantly start bringing that deadline forward, and it's like, be here at 10 minutes before, and you're there 15 minutes before. But now that becomes the standard. You must be there 15 minutes before the 15 before the 15. And I definitely think that workplaces need to be conscious of that, and how that will affect individuals.
Yeah, 100%. We in my company, we just acquired a leadership and culture change and culture management company, and for that exact reason of making sure that the most important asset, which is human capital, and the employees that you have, are well looked after. And we've started to look at a reframe of the work that it's done, and the way that our culture and companies are now going to be run is looking at you're employed for value, you're not employed for time. So if you do a job in an hour, great, you've done it in an hour, go off, do what you want. But if it takes 100 hours, it takes 100 hours. Yeah. So we're not employing, as long as it's in on time, right? So we're not employing you you have to be here between 9 and 5. That's not what we do anymore.
Yeah.
For that one reason of making sure that the expectation is the job gets done, not, I got to stay busy. I got to do that. Do you know what I mean? It's just make sure the job's done. Then, as well as we've gone through leadership training, and we're going through leadership training with some of our C-suite guys, that they know how to create a safe space. And I think that's completely blown out the water. I touched on it before, like having the right relationships to actually have that conversation. In the workplace now, we want our workplace to be a place that is a safe place to come to work. So we encourage, like I was just having a conversation with one of our media buyers, saying that we want you to bring your shit to work. Like, don't leave it at home. because your work and your life is all one thing. It's not like, oh, I've got to balance this with that. It's just everything. If you're having a shit time at work, you're going to take it home.
Right.
If you're having a shit time at home, you're going to bring it to work. So we say, bring it to work. Let's have a conversation about it. This is a safe place to be, right? And when you're in an environment which is a safe place to be, then you'll do good work.
Yeah.
Right.
So, creating, I guess that's one of the points I guess we could talk about as a recommendation, is creating safe relationships or safe environments where you can have a discussion, an open discussion, and just be who you are without an expectation of performance or right. So we don't look at the expectation of performance, we look at the expectation of value.
Yeah. So in terms of that then, so we'll move into solutions. So you mentioned from a workplace point of view, developing those spaces and managing your team in a way that promotes their ability to create that synergy within life and work. What about your personal experience? So what would be your advice in terms of the anxiety issue that you'd faced before? How do you implement things to avoid that in the future?
Yeah, I think one of the big ones is self-awareness. Know who you are and define what your happiness is. Mm-hmm. That's number one. Once you define what your happiness is, and when I say, I mean your happiness, not the happiness that, you know, or definitions of happiness that the world has given you, which is you know, buy a home, have 2.5 kids and a dog with a white picket fence. Not that. Just like, if it's going and living on a bus, go do it. If it's going and being, you know, camping 2 days a week, like I'm doing right now, go do it. If it's traveling, go do it. So define what your happiness is. I think that's the most important thing. And then that's one. Two, actually spend the time to love yourself is one of the big things I've done. So what does self-care generally look like? And it's more than massages and, you know, singing Kumbaya and umming everywhere. It's about going and doing things that give you what I like to call wow moments, right? So define what your wow moments are. So my wow moment, for example, was just today. I was sitting around watching my 2 kids. Well, one kid, one was sitting on a chair.
Yeah, it was crawling.
Crawling. Yeah. Running through this water fountain, laughing, throwing water at another child, and my wife sitting there holding my other kid on a chair. And I was like, oh wow, this is my life, right? And then another wow moment for me is, like, even now, I mean, it's been maybe 2 years or 3 years since my whole family has been in the same location. That's a wow moment for me. So focus on those things that are wow moments is super important. And I try and do that now. So you'll see I do a lot of that. It's kind of going, and that's essentially centered around my relationships, getting those right, getting safe spaces and things like that. And then number 3, if I was to look at anything that I did, was basically set the right, ask yourself a bunch of questions because questions I found are more important than the answers. A lot of this with anxiety, at least I know, is we're always trying to find an answer to what I'm feeling right now. So what is the answer to what I'm feeling? Instead of asking the question, why am I feeling this? Number 1. And then number 2 is, if what's going on in my mind was to happen, what's the worst outcome? Right? So if I was to pick up the phone and this guy was to berate me on the phone, what's the worst that could happen? When you actually think about it, it didn't actually change anything. I could have hung up the phone and said, sorry, pal, I'm not doing this. And hung up the phone. But for me, it was like, oh crap, it'll get more compounded. I'll lose my work. It'll cost me X amount of dollars and da-da-da. And then I was like, when I actually sat down and was able to breathe and go, what's the worst that could happen? I was like, actually nothing.
Yeah.
Like, the worst that could happen isn't actually that bad. In the long term, you have to look at it from the long-term perspective. A lot of anxiety is short-term stuff. No one's ever anxious about 50 years from now. but it's normally like, what's an instant reaction? What's its reaction? So start looking at what is the effect of what could possibly happen, or what's the worst outcome of what could happen in the long term. So that's how I've kind of approached it. And there's multiple ways to approach it, but it's like, understand who you are first, and then build those safe space wow moments, and then how do you self-care?
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful.
What about
you, Fidel?
No, we'll go with you, mate.
No, we'll go with you, Fidel.
Okay, no worries. I feel like you're just making me go, so you can try and take a little bit of Steve, a little bit of mine,
mix it together.
Like, ultimately,
I'm an educated.
Opinion.
I'm an educated person. Wow, man!
You
I
are?
can't believe you'll never agreed, man. Oh,
I just said you are.
no, it's Fidel
with a
who's shaking his
question
head
mark.
and laughing.
You are.
Hey, all right. So in terms for me, there's two things. Compartmentalization of problems. So I use the analogy: if a problem is a pebble and life is throwing that pebble at you, if you allow each of the problems that make up your life, and so in the circumstance of myself, the building, relationship breakdown, stresses of COVID, issues with work, life in general, loneliness, disassociation from family, all that sort of bits and pieces. If each individual pebble, I throw that into a bag and I have that bag hurled at my face, that's going to hurt a lot more than breaking each problem down as its individual component and then looking at it rationally and methodically and going, okay, cool. Issue with the house, that is freaking annoying. But I'm currently working through the solutions that are going to see that fixed in the next X amount of time. Relationship breakdown, yeah, that sucks and it hurts and all that sort of bits and pieces. But what does that mean and what are the lessons? And looking at them individually, so they don't have the ability to snowball. The second part is a little bit about a little touching on what you said, Steve, in terms of creating appropriate responses to problems. And I'll paraphrase, but the Dalai Lama says a statement about worry and how worrying will do you no good. Because if there's a problem that can be fixed, there's no need to worry because it can be fixed. And if it's a problem that can't be fixed, well, worrying does it no good. All it will do is further compound the stress. So you might, if you can't solve that problem, there's no point continuing to focus that energy on that negativity because it won't change the eventual outcome. Sam.
Good. Right.
Well, it was really nice.
Just taking it in. Just taking it in.
I was just like, well, my mind's not as methodical. Okay.
Methodical? Is that what you're trying to say?
Guys?
Sorry, man. I'm listening.
Don't laugh.
Okay, I won't laugh. Go.
Okay, so not being ashamed to have those, to open yourself up and open yourself up to those people that who you trust, having that trust with the ones that have been with you for that long. Mm-hmm. So for example, be like you, Fidel, I've been with that long, and being able to open up to them and say, hey, look, I'm suffering. I'm really struggling. These are the issues that I'm going through. Because you'd be surprised how many people are actually willing to help. Now, I'm not saying they're going to give you a handout. I'm not saying they're going to be able to, but they'll be able to help in other ways. They'll say, hey, man, I know this person who could probably help. Okay, we're going to stick with you through this. You know, that you don't have to do this alone. And not being afraid of judgment, because most people that know you for you are not going to judge you for the scars that you have. And knowing the fact that actually a lot of the ones who are close to you probably know the scars, they can see it. You know, they see the scars that you're wearing. They won't ask you or won't come to you. They're probably saying, we're just going to wait until you're ready to talk to us, because it's not their place to ask. because they don't want to invade your privacy. So I think it's being just open and honest.
I think what we're talking about there is self-humility.
Yeah, just, and I learned that when I was away in America, when I was learning to act. And my teacher always used to say to me, you have to be willing to share your heart to the audience. Open your heart willingly to the audience, because if you share your heart to the audience, they will understand you.
And they can connect.
They can connect. If you don't, then they will just look at you and say, well, it's just a performance. But if you share your heart with them, they are moved by what you're doing. So I think it's the same thing that you have to do. That's what I have to say.
Yeah, no, that's I think you're on the money there, Sam, with the terms of the humility and being able to come to people, showing that courage and bravery to be like, hey, I need help.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah,
need help.
Yeah,
and it takes No, go for it.
I've always said to you, Sam, in some of the chats that we've had over the course of our friendship, it's like, man, I couldn't give a shit if you were rich and famous, or broke poor. Like, I'm still gonna tease you about the fact that you didn't know how to say rissoles. You know what I mean? Like,
and I think and I think it's that thing. Like, it was even like, it's even these last few months you've been saying the same thing to me. It was like this issue around moving into the garage with my parents, and I was like, I don't like it. I don't like it because my stock is low. I don't look good for my stock. And you were like, Sam, what are you talking about? You are in a perfect position. You don't understand how good you have it. You come back from New York, the world has stopped, and for some reason you have been able to get into an MBA course we don't know how you've done it, and you're able to start all over again, and you're right where the world is. Like, you haven't lost any time because of COVID. You're able to still train and re-educate yourself. So when everything is back to normal, you've got options to choose. Like, you're like, stop looking at it from a negative way because your stock is low, because nobody may want you because of your age and whatnot. Like, you've said that to me 100 times, and you have to keep. And I've had to like really self-stop myself and say, oh yeah, this is because of how I look at myself. Like, I still don't treat myself with self-respect. Like, okay, this is okay where I'm at. I still have to get education from you and Stephen on life at 32, that it's okay to start again. It's okay to open up, and it's okay to take, start from humble beginnings and have humility. So.
Yeah, well, I think you both touch on good points there. Well, one being, you have to make the tough decision. I think that's what, if you would look at what you were saying there, Sam, is like, it's a tough decision to open up to your friends. If you've never done it before, and it's not expected, the culture as men is keep everything to yourself and build. It's a bloody tough decision to actually open up and do it. Don't, you know what I mean? Like, let's not sugarcoat it for people listening. Like, opening up ain't easy, especially if you're not in the habit of doing it. Like, there's a culture of opening up with females and women. That's culture. It's easy. It's something they've done. It's something that's expected. It's not easy for blokes to do it. So, like, let's just be real. It's hard.
Yeah, I think
Right?
Again, that takes humility and self-awareness to just be like, you know what?
Yeah. But you got to
cards on the table.
Yeah, but you got to make the decision to make tough decisions. Mm-hmm. You got to make the decision to put your mental health above everything else. You know what I mean? And you've got to make the tough decision to change the lens, is like what I like to call it, is like change the lens of how I see myself, how I see my situation, and how do I best self-care for myself. If that means you know, putting my happiness before my history, great. If that means, you know, putting my happiness in front of, you know, and letting people down in order to keep my happiness and my mental health, like, what does that actually look like? And it starts with being committed to mental health being of value in your life, right? Over the job that you have, the money that you have, the people that you have, the relationships that you've got. Mental health has to be the number one priority, because you can't give or serve anything or anybody if you don't have your own mental health. That was my problem, right? Is I was just recently married, and I then moved to China, essentially, back and forth to China, then back and forth to Melbourne, back and forth, and then into Melbourne, out of China. Like, my schedule was come in on a Friday night or a Saturday morning, see my wife, and leave a Sunday. Yeah. Go to Melbourne, go midweek to Beijing, midweek to Shenzhen, midweek to Singapore, come back, work Thursday, Friday, come back Saturday. That's not a great way to start a marriage. Then on top of that, we had a miscarriage. The day after I had a miscarriage, I left to go to China, right? And because I was struggling with so much anxiety, I had absolutely nothing to give to tomorrow. Absolutely nothing. Which meant that my relationship hit the shitter.
Yeah.
Like, it hit the shitter so much that I couldn't articulate anything to her, because I was keeping it all to myself, because I'm supposed to be the tough provider out here building my $100 million empire, that I couldn't even have a conversation and say, hey, babe, I'm struggling, which meant, and I cut her off and everything, which meant she couldn't have a conversation with me because I wasn't willing to listen.
Yeah.
Right? There's the opposite too. It's not just being able to talk, but also being able to listen. I wasn't able to listen to anybody, right? Because I was so consumed, or I was so used, that I couldn't do it. So it was only when my mental health became a priority, and I had to have a kick up the butt from Sam, a kick up the butt from my dad, a kick up the butt from other people, say, hey, mate, you're about to lose this relationship, you know, a year in, purely because I wasn't able to deal with my own bullshit. I was just consumed by me, right? So it was only when I started to make it a priority, right, over my work, over how much money I had, over other people's opinions, over my history or past, was I then able to kind of fill myself up. Number one, that's what really mental health is, right? It's filling yourself up to be whole, and then into an overflow so I can actually give it to somebody else. You can't help anybody, and you definitely can't help yourself alone. So that was that. Yeah. So that's it's important that you make the tough decision to make it a priority. Your mental health. It starts with a decision.
Sam.
Yeah.
Can I ask one? This is the last thing, because I think we're way over time. But this is a question for you, Fedel. And the reason why I say this is because you're clearly the fittest out of all of us, in terms of body type. Do you think social media has a part to play with men's mental health, in terms of what an ideal man has to look like, and how an ideal man is portrayed in social media?
I think in terms of body image, 100%. It's the same with females looking at the girls in the bikinis, the same with the guys looking at the gym dudes. Yeah, there's that expectation of how I should look as a man. I don't think that plays a part, though, in terms of mental health.
Right.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry. Do you think what you do as a job is the comparison that men make?
As in, so like a dick swinging sort of thing?
Yeah, like what you do as a job, what salary you earn. Do you think that's part of the comparison game there?
It's hard. It's an interesting question. I guess for myself, I don't really personally, I don't compare myself to other men. In terms of issues of my mental health, it's the problems around it. I think, it doesn't matter what job you work, whether you are on a $35,000 salary or a $100,000 salary. Each job will still have stress. You'll still have someone who's superior asking for timelines and deadlines. You'll still have to manage a career, or manage expectation management, trying to achieve individual goals and pursuit of your own internal happiness and self-fulfillment. Managing a relationship in terms of, Steve, you're married. So not only are you trying to fulfill your individual, chakras, if you will, your individual oneself, you've got to now delegate energy to your wife and to your two children. And so you should, like 100%, that's your task as a parent. But that in turn is also fatiguing. And that's where I think that would manifest into mental health. But I don't think mental health, also social media in terms of body image and stuff like that, from my personal experience, I don't think it has as much of an impact on men as probably maybe for some women. I think our issue as men is we fail to show humility and recognize the symptoms within ourselves. Right. And thus that creates compound problems, which then manifests into being angry at partners or family or at work or failing in those things. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. So the male ego plays a part.
100%.
I mean, that's probably a whole other important topic to talk about. How do you kill the ego?
Well, essentially, what you're talking about is toxic masculinity in its quotation. But ego is we as men are typically too stubborn to recognize our own faults.
Right.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Listen, I think that's 100%. I think that's probably it for the night. But hey, to all, including myself, thanks for sharing and being vulnerable and open in terms of some of those personal experiences, despite how awkward and foreign it may feel to talk about them. So no, I appreciate that, and I'm sure the people listening will appreciate the sense of humanism, if you will, by expressing, being like, hey, I'm the happy guy, but 100%, I've taken a hit in life, and that's completely normal.
Yeah, great. Good to be here. Hope it helped.
No, thanks, man.
Right.
Cheers, boys.
Thanks, guys.
Next time.
See you all next time. Subscribe, like,